What is the real story of South Phoenix? Is it a story about pollution and the dumping spot for a city's refuse? Is it a story about violence and gangs? Is it a story of the place where our city sends those who have broken the law to be punished? Is it a story about poverty and disuse? These are all likely the stories that you've seen about South Phoenix on the local news, but the residents of South Phoenix have a different story.
I was born and raised here. I grew up on 7th Avenue and Broadway. I grew up with this mountain looming from my backyard, and I went to the Roosevelt School District. I went to the Phoenix Union High School District. I graduated from South Mountain High School, and I've been here all my life.
I lived in South Phoenix my whole life. I've the house that my mom currently lives in, they moved into that house the day before my oldest sister was born. She's still there. I'm the youngest of two sisters, raised by a single mom.
I was born and raised in South Phoenix, and grew up one of the youngest of 4 children, single mom, and went to Maxino Bush Elementary School, which is part of the Roosevelt School District, and I also went to St. Catherine's, which is the only Catholic diocese grade school in South Phoenix as well.
It's a place full of life and vibrancy, where that's what Black and brown people create. We create life and vibrancy, and South Phoenix is just another representation of that.
Growing up in South Phoenix, I didn't know South Phoenix was like the divested part of Phoenix. I didn't know that. I just thought this is how life is, right? Everyone's brown or black, everyone, has immigrant parents, everyone is kind of poor, but it's okay, it's very normal. And it wasn't until I graduated from high school and went to college and actually left South Phoenix that I realized there are discrepancies between South Phoenix and the other parts of town. So I think the shock comes from maybe I don't look like what they would picture someone from South Phoenix looking like.
So education is all South Phoenix. My family's here. Even my dad's family, and my mom's family are both from neighborhoods in South Phoenix. So that's really where my roots are. I was born here and raised here.
It is kind of funny because sometimes when people find out that I'm from South Phoenix, they're surprised. They don't ever tell me exactly what they were expecting, but it doesn't take too much to kind of make that own conclusion on your own. They're expecting maybe for you to not really care about government policy or public education or health, or even making any kind of systemic change in our community.
The residents of South Phoenix have many stories about this vibrant, beautiful, and tight-knit community. They also have stories about the barriers that this community faces that keep prosperity, health, and equity out of reach for so many.
It's designed to have barriers, and those barriers are very effective, and why Black and brown folks can't go vote, can't engage.
And really understanding this community, really understanding there's a lot of stuff that we fight here that's very common throughout the country, but it's under a microscope here, and nobody's talking about it.
I think a lot of times residents in South Phoenix are not engaged in government because they don't feel that the official has their best interest. They might feel that public policy ends up negatively impacting them, and they don't really have the know-how or the access to create policies that really center them and others of their friends and loved ones that are really directly impacted.
I tell this story all the time. If you show up every day to my house and I punch you in the face, you're eventually going to stop coming. South Phoenix has been punched in the face consistently about every elected official, and eventually he's going to stop going. Like, it's been proven fruitless when they've turned out. It's been fruitless when they don't turn out. It's either to not show up and be disappointed as to show up and be disappointed.
As the population of Phoenix grows, so does the development of our city. That development is coming to South Phoenix, but the question is, will that development benefit the community that already lives in South Phoenix, or will it displace them?
I really became aware of South Phoenix around the 2015 election when they passed Prop 204. And that was like the light rail. And like anybody who ever paid attention to anything understands when the light rail comes to poor black and brown areas, they're just going to move us all out. And that's when I really, really became aware of like the vastness of the issue.
Well, I think it's really interesting. A lot of people are afraid of light rail coming in, but they're kind of excited about it coming in. Mm-hmm. There's like this contradictory like feeling that people get because when when they start talking about like after light rail is actually constructed and it's here, people get kind of excited. Okay, well now South Phoenix is connected with other major parts in the valley, and it's going to be an option for me for transportation.
Not only was it already voted on and a done deal, but that they were already planning on picking out artists, picking out designs, and they had already kind of put in play to make their own decisions all along the way.
Light rail brings a connection. No. Light rail brings opportunity to get what you've actually paid for. South Phoenix has been paying for the light rail for 10 years and never had access to it. I took the bus here. Took me probably like 45 minutes. So it's probably a 15, 20-minute bus ride to just get to the light rail. That's even to have access to the rest of the city. And it provides for the city to actually make good on a promise they probably made when they initially installed in the light rail, that you will get access to this even though it's never come to your neighborhood.
And I think there's a possibility of job opportunities. If they can hire folks from South Phoenix who live in South Phoenix in the development of light rail, including the construction of it.
That is going to cause massive gentrification, and that the city is doing a poor job of ensuring that people know and understand what the effects could be and how to avoid them, so everyone can enjoy like the new benefits of like enhanced public transportation.
From what the little that I know about it, when there's this huge investment in a community, this huge economic investment in a community, what tends to happen is that the poor people of color who live in that community already get pushed out to make room for this new economic investment, for pretty much for profit, for the businesses and the developers and the residents who can now afford to live in that new community that's being developed. So the light rail will most likely be a gentrifier. I think it will displace a lot of local businesses that will not be able to compete with the bigger businesses that are going to be coming through, because the light rail it's going to attract people who would not have ever come to South Phoenix, right? And so if the current folks who live here and who work here cannot afford to compete with the other folks who are coming in, then they're going to be displaced.
And even though these things are all a concern, we still want light rail because we know that is the way development is going, and we need places to get to also. Like, we want to get downtown too. We want to be able to travel easily and have a sustainable and environmentally friendly way to get around our city.
As community members grappled with the impending light rail development, they began to organize. From that organizing, residents came together and enlisted the support of others to begin to address historic and current issues of inequity.
I don't know if I can talk about how Vitalist has impacted the community if I don't talk about first how the community has impacted Vitalist. And I say that because it is it's a relationship, right? You can't impact something if you don't have a relationship with it. And so because of my orientation, I think always looking at it from how the community has impacted us first, for me, just makes a lot of sense. And I think one way they've done that is to show that they belong in our space. They belong in a philanthropic space, and they can teach us, and they can help us understand what health really looks like from the community's point of view, and not an imposed point of view from a foundation. And so I think we've always said that as a foundation. We believe that the community has the answers. We're very strengths-based, bottom-up sort of framing. But I think the community has held us accountable to that in a way that I've never experienced before, especially in the last 18 months through the RRR initiative.
In 2016, in 2016, I think it was August or September, yeah. And the conversation started around light rail. Light rail's coming to South Phoenix. And so we wanted to do something about it. We wanted to figure out how can we become involved in this light rail development so that we can ensure more equitable engagement of the light rail.
RRR, I don't like to use experiments, but RRR was like a community-based idea that like you will let people do the work that's best suited for them, and they'll engage their community in ways that best works for their community.
Because it's never been done, and it's never been done properly. It's never been done in a way that's where all voices are getting heard. Equitable engagement's always been with South Phoenix. It's interesting because I kind of feel like I'm repeating myself a lot because for the past year and a half I've been kind of saying all this stuff, but the idea is if you are part of a church, of an organization, those are the communities that you go to. If you're part of a school, we'll go to the schools, we'll go to church. That's how you organize. But a lot of people in South Phoenix, like I said, I went to church here, I went to school here. Those systems weren't for me, but yet I was still in them and I was a part of them. And even if I was a part of them, I still never felt like I was a part of them. It's a weird way of saying that. But of those people who were pushed out of them, I have friends' dads who were asked to change their clothing before they went to the church, and he found that in great disrespect, so he never went back again. People have trouble at home, kids, they're hungry, whatever, and they get in trouble at school, disciplinary actions, and then they get pushed out of these systems of education because they're acting up. So South Phoenix is made up of a lot of that. It's a lot of people who just didn't fit into these organizations like school, churches, nonprofits, and but yet they're still law-abiding citizens. They go to their jobs every day. They work 9 to 5. They've been working since they were 16. Their parents, but yet they still feel an incredible mistrust with the police. And if you're not a part of these, like I said, these factions, you're not considered part of the community. So why are all these people, mothers and fathers and, just people living on their own? Why do they not matter? Why does their voice not matter? Just because they don't have this title, this entitlement? And
so I helped co-found the community initiative Remain, Reclaim, Reimagine with a couple of my friends that I've known all my life. We went to grade school together, and when we all found out what was going on with the light rail, we knew we had to do something, and it needed to come from an authentic place that had to expand what we all started, what our all initial understanding of civic participation was. So we started doing community storytelling sessions. We did workshops, story circles, and we really tried to get a different, diverse understanding of South Phoenix and how our families live and work and interact with each other. Some of our artists that went to our workshop are graffiti and street artists, so we felt that they'd be a natural fit for when it came to selecting local artists to create the art on the South Phoenix Light Rail project.
Everyone thinks that I'm a gigantic fan of the storytelling. I think storytelling was probably the most significant skill I've picked up in the last 2 years. It allowed me to communicate with people drastically better about how things work, and allowed me to really understand better when people are talking and what they're trying to get at when they tell you often long, drawn-out, boring stories. But you really be able to pick out the piece that they're actually trying to get to that's important to them, and it immensely helped me understand and talk to people so much better.
So for me, RRR was like a thinking hub. For me, what I learned a lot out of participating in RRR. I didn't do a whole lot of action while in RRR. I wasn't a community organizer, and I didn't lead a project like some of the other folks did. But for me, RRR was a space to learn and to have critical conversations around gentrification, oppression, racism, displacement. It was the first time that I learned about displacement, what that meant. And so for me, RRR was a safe space to start thinking critically about my community, and what's happening to it. And so for RRR, that's what RRR means to me. Oh, well, because the art installations, they're pretty permanent, right? And they are going to be, they are going to represent the station and the surrounding community in the light rail, right? Whatever station our installation is on is gonna have to speak to that space, to that geographic area. And also because when stuff like this happens, you never get local artists involved, right? You make the call to artists, and who comes? It's the artists who traditionally have these opportunities presented to them, and who are the ones who get pushed into these opportunities, and so it marginalizes the local artists even more.
As much as a person can be, I try to be engaged. It's like a multi-billion-dollar project that's being expanded. There's money that was put into community engagement to understand gentrification, business engagement, community engagement, all this different stuff. They've selected They selected an artist that was based largely on community participation, but that in itself was not an easy fight, because not a lot of people knew about it, and it was because of the work of one group, which was RRR, that got that voice out. Because even these other groups that were supposed to represent artists and supposed to represent the community, they weren't. That word wasn't getting out, and it was again very the self-interest of that. But what ended up happening was, I think Valley Metro and the city of Phoenix kind of got a wake-up call that how important it is for engagement of the community. That kind of like, how can you fix something if you don't know about it? And I think they're actively trying to change that because of the voices that were said, because of the relationships that were made. I think they're trying to change that in an equitable way.
but like they're interested in art, and they got artists who weren't engaged at all to like come and start talking about like, well, actually this thing is happening, or I tried to do this thing and never would get to me, and people got the opportunity to really pursue like passions and areas that they actually cared about. That's what I think was really like Triple R allowed them to be themselves and still organize their community in the best way that worked for whatever their community is.
And it just doesn't make sense. If it's coming into South Phoenix, it needs to be done by South Phoenix, right? So I was very fortunate to serve on the committee for the Rozier station. And I had a little bit of say into the artists that we chose, and I'm proud that most of the artists that are going to be installing their art along the light rail in South Phoenix are local. So it's very important because they're going to speak our history, and they're going to represent us in many ways. So
I believe that when you invest in community leadership, you are really activating that self-determination in residents. You're making them assured that their knowledge is powerful and should be used for leverage, and that their life experience, no matter what the mainstream narrative says, is valuable and is worthy of reverence, respect, and really showing how important it is to reclaim your story.
Triple R was just a beginning. What has resulted from the investment in the Triple R resident leaders is a ripple effect of change and influence that could be felt throughout our entire city.
When we're working on the problems or the issues that plague kind of our community and our nation, we're talking about system level issues. These are not technical problems. These are adaptive problems. And adaptive problems it takes new learning. It's not something that people already have. So these problems that we're trying to address is going to take new learning. And who knows these problems most intimately are the people who encounter and endure every day. And so those solutions that are in our communities that we have not tapped into is really an opportunity for to have leadership look a different way. Not centered patriarchy, not centered whiteness, but centering humanity and centering people that can come together to solve those problems together. They have solutions that we have not looked into fleshing out. And through that leadership, like I saw in Triple R, there was just a kind of a sprawling out of solutions. They didn't all look the same. They came in different ways and packages, but just this ripple effect of solutions. Not just one size fit all, but how do we allow those solutions to kind of happen in concert together to solve our problems?
And I'd say another thing that it did is help to support me thinking from a systems lens and really looking for who are the decision makers and what really causes issues in society, because I think often we say, okay, we're going to deal with diabetes and we're going to do the medical approach, but there's all these systemic factors and other pieces to it, to the particular issue of like why some populations have more diabetes than others. And so really always looking for like root systemic causes changed my thinking a lot. And I'd also say that my work has changed in how I think about connecting with others through storytelling. So because my role as diarist, I was able to kind of track the journey and be part of a lot of these meetings and a lot of the things that took place. The storytelling also stood out to me to see how the narratives we have for people and like dominant narratives versus the narratives that people would share sometimes conflict, and it's really important to value each person's story and also understand that the way a story is told is based on a certain paradigm or framework and how they think about the world and how they're taught. I'm trying to naturally pause.
Good job. Well done.
And so the storytelling piece was really important because it helped challenge how I take in a narrative, and if it's a dominant narrative, really being more critical as to where that narrative came from. And so RRR affected my work immensely.
I mean, we restarted the BLM chapter. I got involved with a bunch of small stuff I can't think of right now, but I think the biggest thing was like restarting the Black Lives Matter chapter in Phoenix.
And how it's influenced my leadership, I think, you know, it's definitely made me more aware of the kinds of hoops and barriers that a community member might encounter in trying to be involved. I was just thinking that if it wasn't because of my involvement in RRR, I never would have known about this committee, about this application process, about this opportunity. So I'm just wondering, like, how do we make these opportunities more accessible so that you don't have to be part of a group that's doing this work very specifically to know about these opportunities? Yeah.
It wasn't just everyday strangers we were building as resident leaders. These were our neighbors, our family, our friends and loved ones.
Because that's where you're going to get the truth. If the right leaders are chosen, if it's done equitably, right? Not just, hey, you fit these, you check these boxes, come here. It's not tokenized, but to really understand, like, what is the issue that we are trying to find out? What are the unknown issues? How do we find that? How do we we all jump on some sort of bandwagon. We all just jump on, what are we gonna fix this week? What's this year? It's the year of oppression. Which one are we gonna tackle? And us in South Phoenix are just like, that's been going on. That ain't nothing new. The cops been shooting us. The cops been arresting us and taking us out to the middle of nowhere, throwing us into the desert with no shoes.
I definitely gained the ability to speak about oppression and systems of oppression, and I think I got this analysis down, you know, like I got this, and I learned about mass incarceration and displacement and the different ways that displacement occurs. And so I would not be able to talk to you the way I'm talking to you today if it wasn't for my participation at RRR. So the just being able to use the correct words to describe what's been happening to my community has been, that's where I've gained the most.
How I thought about the work that I was doing around collective impact and neutral facilitation, my ideas around systems change, and how that needs to be reflective of the community and what they're interested in, and understanding that community work, or some people call grassroots work, is a very organized work. It's not haphazard, it is intentional, and it's based in love for the whole community and not just this one like individual. And so it helped me to align my values to, if I say that I want to help people and I say that I want a stronger community for my family and myself and my friends, then how do I continue to work separately from that community and trying to get to that result? So it just rocked my world, changed how I thought about my work and how I now do my work.
So honestly, RRR was really transformational in how I approach work related to social justice and just in general any sort of work that's trying to address a social problem, because it challenged my assumptions and kind of cultural lessons on like formal education versus informal education. I mean, that was a big takeaway for me, is that often in society, you know, everyone continues to say, go get higher education, and if you have a PhD, then you're more of an expert. And I think what really stood out with RRR is that it wasn't about your degree or your formal education. It was about your expertise as a resident, as someone who has dealt with different issues, in South Phoenix, or whether being a person of color or specific systemic issues. Like, that in itself is an expertise, and that taking that lesson now into other spaces and really challenging people's assumptions to say that expertise comes in many forms. And so that really stood out for me and kind of impacted my work.
Sure. So I think the broader influence on the work that I do is thinking more deliberately about who isn't, quote unquote, at the table, and then turning to my colleagues and saying, who else can we support and coach and give needed support in order to have them be ready to advocate for their community at the table. I think Vitalist as an institution, and I count myself as part of that, it's very easy to look to institutions to be the spokespeople for communities where residents themselves, if coached and given the right resources, are more than able to talk about the challenges and opportunities they see in these types of public investments. So I think for me, it's influenced me in that I saw sort of the process that went into investing in and supporting the organizers within RRR. And so from now on, I'll be able to sort of figure that better into my calculus of how public investments are coming to fruition, if that makes sense.
It's about community leadership will allow the actual ideas and the people that folks have self-chosen or chosen to run them actually. If you invest in your traditional leadership, which is going to be universities, places like that, you're getting the same people who already have access. But community leadership is based on the people who already live there, who are already living the life, and allowing them to lead the discussion to make it actually equitable. Because I don't know how artists in South Phoenix feel, so that wouldn't make me a community leader for that. But if you invest in people who talk to them, work with them, and are them, they will tell you what they're dealing with, how they feel the best way to address their actual own issues.
You may be asking yourself, why was it so important to invest in RRR? The answer is because it's a shining example of how philanthropy can build real capacity for social change.
But I think also investing, what's a really big important aspect to invest, especially when it comes to foundations, is that the resident leaders are going to be the ones that are going to tell you if it's a success or not. The resident or these leaders, community leaders, are the ones who are going to tell you if something's changed and what's happened. Not from reports, not from articles, not from PowerPoints. You're going to know from the residents if there has been a change and what has changed and why there is a change. Not by looking at data. And that's why it's really important to invest in leaders.
Because it's never happened. and I think to me, when I hear the word equity, I think how do we get more people of color involved? That's what I automatically think of. It's just a nicer sounding word that is a little bit more politically acceptable, I think, if I can say that. But to me, that's what it means. How can we get communities who are traditionally excluded from any decision making around land and resources and economic development? How do we get those communities involved? And I've learned that really no one knows how to do equitable engagement, because when you start asking folks, how do you want to be engaged? They want to be listened to. That's how you start engaging people, is you shut up and listen. And you listen to their concerns, and you validate their concerns, and And then you come back and you listen again, and you sit down and listen again. And that's a lot of work. It's really hard work, and it hurts. It's very painful, especially if you are coming from an institution and maybe you were the one who, not you personally, but your institution was the one who brought some of that hurt. So it's hard, but I think it's very much needed in South Phoenix. It's about time that they're starting to look down here for these kinds of investments. But they got to do it right, or they're just going to be continuing the status quo.